Welcome to Bodhi Unified Flow, the place where we simplify complexity and amplify performance. Today, we're diving straight into a crucial explainer, the foundations of behavioral change, specifically looking at constructing a daily practice. We are on part 5, reviewing the small scope, assessing your progress, and adjusting your daily practice anchor. So if you've ever struggled to make a habit actually stick long-term, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get right into it. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Why small scope matters. 2. Measuring true habit automaticity. 3. Diagnostic progress assessment. 4. Troubleshooting the anchor. And finally, 5. Sustainable behavioral maintenance. By the time we wrap up this explainer, you're going to have some incredibly powerful tools under your belt. You'll understand the real metabolic constraints of your brain, learn how to measure true automaticity instead of just looking at outcomes, and master the Checkmark and X diagnostic method. Plus, you'll know exactly how to expertly troubleshoot your daily triggers using a calibration matrix, just like a true behavioral scientist. All right, section 1. Why small scope matters, bypassing the prefrontal cortex. 35,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. In our modern digital world, we are forced to make up to 35,000 decisions every single day. Think about your own morning, deciding which email to answer first, what to wear, picking between oat milk or almond milk. To put that into perspective, back in the late 20th century, that number was closer to 3,000. So this massive cognitive overload is exactly why sheer willpower completely fails us when we try to make huge lifestyle changes. You see, your brain is a metabolically constrained organ. It simply doesn't have the physical fuel to power through that many conscious choices and still have the energy to build a demanding new habit from scratch. It's literally impossible to muscle your way into a new routine when you're already bleeding decision-making energy by 10 a.m. So, how does the brain handle this? Notice the divide here in how our brain works. On the left side, you've got the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is your conscious, goal-oriented center. It's high energy, requires immense effort, and it exhausts incredibly quickly. Think of it as the CEO of your brain, super smart, but gets tired out very fast. On the right side is the basal ganglia. This is your autopilot system. It uses almost zero energy to run deeply ingrained routines. You know those days you drive to work and suddenly realize you don't even remember the last 3 miles? That is your basal ganglia doing the heavy lifting. By keeping the scope of a new habit tiny, what we call a micro habit, we are deliberately bypassing that easily exhausted prefrontal cortex. We take that new behavior and slip it right into the highly efficient basal ganglia. And this brings us to a brilliantly insightful quote from behavioral scientist Nathan Azrin. If you focus only on the outcome, you miss the learning. Think about how true that is. How often do we totally obsess over the massive end goal? We want to lose 20 pounds, write a giant book, run a marathon. But if we only look at that huge outcome, we completely ignore the crucial tiny behavioral processes that have to happen every single day. We miss the actual mechanics of the habit. So let's look at how we actually measure those foundational daily behaviors. Moving right along to section 2, measuring true habit automaticity, the active ingredient of habit strength. The big concept we need to grasp here is automaticity. Researchers literally call this the active ingredient of a habit. Basically, it exists when a behavior happens in a cognitively efficient way, largely outside of your conscious intention, awareness, or control. You just find yourself doing it. True automaticity relies entirely on efficiency. It does not rely on you hyping yourself up in the mirror every morning with conscious motivation. Let's be real, if you have to give yourself a massive pep talk just to do the thing, it is not a habit yet. It is still an effortful action stuck in your prefrontal cortex. To actually measure this shift from hard effort to pure autopilot, behavioral scientists use a fantastic tool called the SRBAI, or the Self-Report Behavioral Automaticity Index. It's just 4 simple questions you need to ask yourself about your daily practice. Do I do it automatically? Do I do it without having to consciously remember? Do I do it without thinking? And do I start doing it before I even realize I'm doing it? Think about tying your shoes. You don't sit there deliberating over the laces, your hands just move. If you can answer yes to these 4 questions for your new routine, you have successfully embedded it. This is your true scientific benchmark for progress. It replaces those vague feelings of, am I doing okay, with concrete, reliable data. Now for section 3, diagnostic progress assessment, framing slip-ups as valuable data. Okay, let's talk about the Checkmark and X journaling method. It is an incredibly effective diagnostic tool. Step 1, you take a baseline week and simply place a check mark every time an unwanted habit occurs. No judgment, no guilt, just pure cold observation like a scientist in a lab. Step 2, you design a tiny, positive replacement routine that uses the exact same trigger as the old habit. Step 3, you track the new, positive habit with an X on your log. And step 4, you simply watch the X's start to outnumber the check marks over time. The visual reinforcement of this shift on paper actively releases dopamine in your brain, naturally cementing that learning pathway. You are effectively reframing your failures as mere diagnostic data points, removing all the emotional baggage from the equation. Why does this matter so much? Well, treat setbacks as temporary echoes of past behaviors, not blueprints for your future. When you maintain that empathetic objectivity, you completely remove the shame from skipping a day or making a mistake. And why is removing shame scientifically important? Because shame triggers an emotional threat response in your amygdala, which literally takes your prefrontal cortex offline. You lose the ability to plan logically. By staying totally objective, you keep your brain's logic center fully engaged so you can act like an architect, calmly optimizing your behavioral system. Which brings us to section 4, troubleshooting the anchor. Calibrating the habit interface. If you're building a habit stack, it requires an anchor. But remember this absolute golden rule. Your new habit will never, ever be stronger than its anchor. Take a look at the weak anchors on the left, after lunch, or when I have time, or if I remember. These are incredibly vague, they require on-the-spot decisions, and they cause massive mental friction. I mean, what time is lunch? How much time do you actually need? Now look at the rock-solid anchors on the right, after I turn off my morning alarm, or when I place my coffee mug on the table. These are hyper-specific, tangible, physical actions. A successful trigger has to be rock-solid and completely context-independent. It should happen exactly the same way whether it's Tuesday, Saturday, raining, or shining. Now, when things break, and let's be real, they will break, this troubleshooting matrix is your absolute best friend. Look at that first row, direct transition failure. If transitioning from your anchor to your new habit takes more than 20 seconds, your brain is going to start micro-negotiating. It'll start looking for a way out, saying, the book is all the way upstairs, I'll just read tomorrow. The calibration action here, redesign your physical environment. Put the book right on your pillow. Put your running shoes directly blocking the bathroom door so you trip over them. Or consider cognitive fatigue. You might be stacking way too many new habits at once. If that's happening, reduce the stack to just one tiny habit. Apply the 2-minute rule. Standardize your physical environment and your triggers before you even try to optimize the habit itself. Finally, section 5, sustainable behavioral maintenance, long-term system dynamics. To ensure this sticks for years, not just a couple of weeks, we can borrow from established applied behavior analysis, or ABA, principles. The biggest takeaway here is that you shouldn't just try to suppress bad habits through sheer willpower. That is a losing battle against your own biology. Instead, focus on behavior reduction through active replacement. Let's say your unwanted habit is mindlessly scrolling social media when you feel stressed at your desk. You take that exact identical trigger, that specific feeling of stress at the desk, and you insert a healthy replacement behavior, like taking a sip of water or doing one single neck stretch. You actively acquire and anchor a new skill, gradually fading the prompts until it's completely independent. You're replacing the wiring, not just fighting the old spark. You can also supercharge your space using what's known as somatosensory training architecture. It sounds complex, but it basically just means using your physical environment to cue your brain. You see, our brains are incredibly spatial. A physical object, like a small statue on your desk or a specific colored pen, can serve as a powerful spatial anchor for focus. Maintaining a clean, dedicated workspace preserves cue visibility so your brain doesn't get overwhelmed by visual clutter. You can even use the physical threshold of a doorway to trigger a micropause. Imagine taking 3 mindful breaths every time you cross a doorway before entering a meeting. These durable physical environmental cues act like a fortress, protecting your new routines from the chaos of daily life. Now, let's set some realistic expectations with the habit stabilization timeline. We've all heard that 21 days to form a habit myth, right? Well, research by Lally and colleagues actually shows that on average, it takes about 66 days for a simple habit to reach real automaticity. And sometimes it takes up to 254 days for complex ones. So remember that strict 20-second rule for transitions between your anchor and your behavior. That is crucial. And importantly, plan to conduct a formal, recurring review of your behavioral anchors after 1 year. Our lives, our jobs, and our contexts inevitably change, so our anchors need to adapt too. Respecting this scientific timeline is what secures the long-term integrity of your daily practice. So, I want you to ask yourself this absolutely critical question right now to evaluate your current routines.
Are you relying on fragile willpower to force change, or are you constructing a structurally sound, automated daily practice? Remember, human behavior is strictly governed by metabolic constraints. We only have so much energy in a day. Success ultimately depends on intelligent structural design, not just trying harder, wishing for more motivation, or brute forcing your way through cognitive fatigue.
Let's bring it all together. Here's what we've achieved in this explainer. We've mapped out exactly how to bypass cognitive overload by using small-scope micro-habits. We explored how to measure true, scientifically valid automaticity using the SRBAI framework. We learned how to replace toxic shame with actionable data using the diagnostic checkmark and Xlog. You now have the exact matrix to calibrate your triggers when things go off the rails, and the psychological ABA principles to maintain them for the long haul. Here are the key references and studies backing up today's explainer, strictly focused on the behavioral science we've discussed. Thank you so much for joining us here at Bodhi Unified Flow. Keep in mind that sustainable, massive growth is almost never about making a giant, exhausting leap. It is simply the accumulation of tiny, perfectly calibrated daily practices. So as you look at your life right now, what specific 20-second micro-habit will you perfectly anchor today to completely change your trajectory for tomorrow?